Hi there, my name is Ben and I just wanted to spend a few minutes to talk about my latest application, which is a fantasy settlement generator that I'm developing for Apple devices and Android devices. What you can see here is the Android simulator that I've just brought up, and I will demonstrate basically what this application does now. So currently we can select a settlement size. We can go range from an outpost to a much larger city. That's going to adjust the population size, and within that we have these size categories. So each of those, we could have a tiny outpost, or we could have a huge outpost, or we could have a tiny city or a huge city or an average city, and so on, and everything else in between. We can distribute the race distribution, so we could have more humans than elves and so on. The terrain distribution can also be modified, and all these factors are all going to change the way that the settlement is generated. And the whole idea is at the end of this we will have a set information, a set of villagers or townspeople that have a history, have jobs, have interests, have family relations, all that depth that you normally have with kind of a world building, and normally the things you'd have to do manually within a Dungeons and Dragons game or a Pathfinder game. I wanted to make it an automatic process. Most game masters, dungeon masters don't really want to be spending hours and hours of the time generating that, but you might have a case where a party walks into the local tavern and says, right, who's in here? And what this will allow is that every townsperson in here that gets generated will have a schedule. It will list the structures that are in that town, and you'll be able to say, right, I want to select the Lucky Horsefoot Tavern, and I want to see who's going to be in here in the afternoon. It will have a list of those villagers that have a schedule that they might be in there, and then within that you'll be able to see who they are, what their interests are, what their jobs are, just in case the party decides to speak to them or whatever. So you won't have to be trying to think up of names on the fly and think, oh, yeah, this is Bob, he's a woodcutter, I think. And then we'll go, hang on a minute, there's no trees around this settlement. How is he a woodcutter? Uh, so the idea is that what's generated here will make sense with all the terrain, all the races and so on. You won't get caught out by your by the party, by the players, and you'll just have more information at your disposal, and you'll be able to concentrate on more important things like the quest. So resources, again, very similar. What's around this settlement? Is there trees around it? Is there woods or a forest or river? If it's a fishing village and so on. And that will govern what jobs there are available in the settlement. Factions, is there a local king? Is there a governor, a baron? Is it a criminal settlement? Is it run by a guild? You'll be able to set that up in there. And history, you'll be able to set up events that have happened in the settlement that perhaps have shaped the settlement. An earthquake or a plague or an attack by trolls, anything like that. And that information will embed itself within the simulation. So, for example, you might run into an NPC who lost his wife to an attack by the trolls when they entered the village. Maybe the guy's got one arm from the attack as a leftover thing, and perhaps he has a phobia of trolls as a result, or intense hatred. You'd think that would be quite normal, I think. So that's just an example of what eventually will be part of this application. So now if I finally generate the settlement, bear in mind this needs to be sped up. At the minute it's not as fast as I would hope. Certainly if I wanted to generate a city, it's going to be very slow. But it does a settlement of 150 people in a few seconds, as we just saw. It's now generated it. 131 people. So we want to go straight in and perhaps look straight at the families that have been generated. These are all the families, all the surnames. As we can see, there are two sets of banner families, hence why there's a 2 there. And we can see that there's at least 3 families which seem to have dominance. And this is something I've noticed, that a lot of families seem to die out. Now, I've set it up as a patriarchy for simplicity's sake. I will change this and allow more options in the future, because as a fantasy setting you could have lots of ways that names are passed down and so on, and it's not necessarily just going to be a male dominated world. So the Connor family has a whopping 71 people still living in it. 43 on top of the 71 have died over the years, including Grim Connor, the founder. So we can go into him and see he's got 9 children already, but if we dig a bit more into his details, we can see he died at age 67. He was married to Marion Fields and they had 9 children. But if we go back and we perhaps look at someone who's a bit younger, we can see that he is a child, one of the 9 children of Grim Connor and Marion Fields. He has 4 children himself, and he's married himself. He's 57. If we have a look in his own personal event history, we can see that he was married when at 17 to a much older woman and had a son. His father died a year later. Then he had another son, a daughter, and then another daughter. Then his mother died, and then he died, leaving his older wife as a widow, and all his children survived him as well. And every single one of these villages will have their own unique history and events. We can see this lady married Sigrid Kirkby and had children with him and is still alive. We can filter out the dead family members, so we're just looking at the living ones. And we can see that the much younger ones are obviously have no children because they're underage. But yeah, we get all of that. So going back up now, obviously now I've got the filter on for just living families. We can see there's only 3 families that have living members. All these others got absorbed into the other families, presumably, or were too old at the point when they settled in. This lady looks like she had a child, so she would have married one of the other into one of the other families. I've kept her surname, and she doesn't appear on the other family, even though she is part of that. And the children go under the father at the minute. But as I've said, this is something I intend to make configurable in the future. So it's not necessarily going to be a patriarchy. I just want to make that very clear. We can have a look at the global events. So the settlement was founded with 30 settlers 200 years ago, and if we go through all the events, we can see that we'll eventually end up at 1479, because it's set to be 200 years. We see people are still being born, people are still dying. This person lived and died within the simulation. People getting married, remarried, widows, and so on. So my next step is to give the villagers jobs based on what's available, what the demand is for the markets and so on within the time. Obviously, if it does have a river nearby, there's going to be fishermen, people building boats. That's going to make up a lot of the economy. People will have their own likes, dislikes, personalities. As you can see, if I just go on this random person, the stats here are based on the SRD, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition document that is legally usable. And these are humans, so they've got the typical human +1 stat to each of these scores. But this is going to be randomized, and genetics will determine whether or not someone is strong or not. If the parents had a high strength, there's more chance of them having a high strength, and so on. So I will adjust that in the future, and obviously other races will get the racial bonuses as well. But there'll be a factor between what is the base stats of a race, what the person does as a living. A blacksmith might have a higher strength than, say, someone who works for the local courts, just as an example. These things will all factor in. And the idea is, in the end, you'll have an intelligently generated settlement that will make sense. The economy will make sense. The people living in it will make sense. And you'll be able to bring that data up. And one of the big things is how I present the data. At the minute, this is a very basic interface. Well, it's not at all nice to look at. I'm going to work on that, but at the minute it makes more sense to generate the data fast, to get that information out there. It's a work in progress, and I just wanted to explain exactly what it was and perhaps how it differs from a lot of the generators, which I think are more just based on randomly generating a name and don't necessarily have any real logic or smarts connecting things up, because that's the big challenge really. So yeah, that's my work, and I've got it cut out for me. So thanks very much, and if you'd like to follow me and track my progress, then my Twitter handle is @Benelio. Put it down there. So I'd be very interested in your comments if you wanted to comment on the video, or drop me a line, as I've said, at my Twitter handle, and we'll see where we go from there. So thanks very much, and have a good day.